Okay, this is just a short video showing you a Lucas starter that goes to a 1980 MGB, and all I'm doing is cleaning it up, but I figured I'd just kind of show you the parts. So this is the main body of the starter. It's got some tape on it. It's got electrical connection over here, and here are the parts. This is actually the solenoid actuator that kicks the gear in to the flex plate or flywheel, depending on if it's an automatic or a stick shift car. Stick shift, it's called a flywheel. Automatic, it's called a flex plate. And then here's the actual plunger, and this plunger has a little spring on this side and a spring underneath. It goes right in this slot right here, and it was kind of greasy and oily, so I cleaned them both up. And I'm going to use a little bit of this white lithium grease to grease the plungers. For lack of a better term, it's like an actuator. This little spring-loaded piece here, it goes inside this housing here, and there's a lever that comes down to the gear. And here's your starter gear, and when your starter spins, it kicks it out like that, and then it goes into your flywheels, the teeth in the flywheel, and that's what turns your engine over. And then once your car starts, it deactivates and goes that way. And it's this little plunger assembly here that kicks it in and out. So it's kind of wrapped up in tape. I'll take the tape off and show you what the inside lever assembly to the gear that goes this way looks like. Okay, so here's the starter with the tape removed. There's the contact right there that goes inside the motor. The other contact is actually just the body of the starter, the negative. And the MGB, they changed to a negative ground. I think it was 1968. So this is negative, and this right here is your positive lead, and it goes to the back of your starter solenoid there. But I'll show you the inside connection I was telling you about. Inside there, you can see the lever, and that lever, when the gear goes in and out, see how that lever moves depending on if the gear is in or out. That lever has to, it actually has to go right in this piece right there. You have to push the spring in, and the lever goes right in there. And what you do is you put a little bit of white lithium grease right here, and then I'm going to put some also on the copper, just a real light coat on the plunger assembly. So that goes inside there, and like I said, this has to slide around that lever. And so after you put the plunger in, then you put the actual solenoid itself, and this is just a big electromagnet, and it goes in there, and when it activates or actuates, then that's when it pulls this plunger assembly in. The lever comes this way, the gear goes that way and kicks into the flywheel. Now there's just some basic parts on a starter. A starter is basically just a motor. So you have windings in here too, and then there's magnets in there that will actually an iron core in there. But the electromagnetic field is turned on by this right here. So when you put positive to this, then it'll spin the motor. Now it won't kick the starter in until you have the solenoid activated, and that's what you have here. This is the solenoid. So you have I believe there's 4 connections that go on here, and 1 connection that goes there, and this is actually the trigger. When that gets positive power, then it energizes the solenoid here and pulls that starter in. At the same time, it gives juice to the motor, and the motor starts to spin. And inside here you've got bushings. The bushings usually wear out. There's one in the nose piece right here, and there's one back there. Sometimes you can get those and replace those, the little oil light or brass bushings. And really the only other part in a starter that goes bad are the brushes. And the brushes, you'll see when you take this piece off, they're spring loaded, so you have to be careful. I wouldn't even attempt it unless you have a source for getting those brushes. But you can rebuild the starter relatively cheaply if you can get, inexpensively, if you can get the parts. So I'm going to reassemble this. I'm going to put a little dab of white lithium grease there. Like I said, a little bit right here on the plunger assembly. Then it's just a matter of bolting the solenoid back up to this with the appropriate side down, which in this case is going to be this side goes to this contact right here. And there's a 1/2 inch nut, and that's what secures it, and then the starter is reassembled. I'll show you that later. Okay, so now you can see the plunger assembly, and I've got it here. It's got some white lithium grease on it. Now you have to be careful because it's on that lever. When it's on, it's spring loaded, so if you wiggle this too much, it pops off, and you have to make sure that it's not popped off when you put this on. Now this one has a rubber boot from the factory. It's pretty torn up, but I've seen them with the rubber boot off. And like I said, I'm going to slip this on there, and then I'm going to put it in the downward position so that lines up with this, and then I just assemble it with the 2 bolts right here. Okay, so here we go. It's fully assembled. You can see that that just needs to be tightened a little bit, and I've got these bolts on. Now the bolts go this way. The odd thing about this starter is this housing is threaded, and so is the housing for the solenoid. So when you're putting it together, you want to push these two together before you start the bolt as much as you can. Otherwise you'll have a gap, and when you start to tighten it, you'll strip this out. So you press the solenoid onto the housing real tightly so that this mates before you start tightening that bolt. And then we'll just tighten this up a little bit, and that's basically it. There's your starter. If you want, you can apply a little bit of grease there or right here. I just used a little dab of white lithium right there. I didn't rebuild the starter. I just wanted to clean up that solenoid because I know they get greasy and they stick sometimes, meaning this solenoid here. So the plunger assembly that pulls the Bendix gear, that's what they call this, and it comes out this way. And that's it for the video. And this is for a 1980 MGB. It's a Roadster, but it's the little 1400cc engine, and this is the starter for it. And that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed the video.